The day no one remembered except him's rain had been falling since morning, soft and steady, like the sky was whispering sadness over the city. Sandra sat by the large window of her quiet home, a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. Outside, the gray light wrapped the trees in fog. It was her birthday. She was 59 today, but the house was silent. No calls, no messages, not even from her agent, not even from the few friends who still lived in the fast-moving world of Hollywood. She had stepped away from it all nearly a decade ago, and slowly the noise of her past life faded. People forgot. Even though she once trusted, Sandra wasn't bitter. She had chosen this life, the quiet, the peace. She had left the cameras and interviews behind. She had learned to love the sound of the wind and the taste of solitude. But today felt heavy, not because she expected balloons or candles, not because she wanted fame again, but because even her sister, who never missed a year, had sent nothing. She turned the television on just to fill the space. An old movie played. Her movie. A scene where she stood beside him, Keanu Reeves, her co-star, her friend. The man she once spoke to almost daily. The man who had disappeared from her life exactly 10 years ago, after something unspoken passed between them. Something quiet and invisible. A distance that formed slowly, like mist gathering on glass. No fight, no anger, just silence that stayed. And now, as she watched their younger selves laugh on screen, she smiled sadly. Her phone buzzed. She didn't expect much. Maybe a birthday discount message from a store? Maybe a weather alert, but it wasn't that. It was a message from Keanu. Happy birthday, Sandy. Hope you're smiling today. It's just that. No emojis, no long paragraphs. It's just words that felt like a warm hand on her shoulder. Her eyes filled. Stared at the screen, unmoving. 10 years. Not a word. And now this? She set the phone down and stood up. Her knees ached a little. Age did that, but her heart felt something unfamiliar. A pull, not of romance. Not yet, but of memory. 10 years. Earlier, the last time they saw each other was at a small film premiere in Los Angeles. It wasn't even their movie. They'd walked the carpet together, done interviews, posed for photos, and afterward, they sat at a table near the back of a quiet restaurant. Both of them tired, both of them hiding small things in their eyes. Keanu had leaned in and asked, "Do you ever think of leaving this?" She remembered how serious he looked. How tired every day, she had whispered. He smiled, not with his eyes. They said goodbye that night with a hug that lingered just a second too long. A hug that meant more than either of them could say. After that, no more texts, no calls. Not because they didn't care, but because maybe it was easier. To walk separate paths, to avoid what might have been or could have been. And yet here he was. Message today. Sandra picked up the phone again. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She could write something simple, something safe. Thank you. But that felt too empty. Instead, she typed, "How did you remember?" She stared at it, hesitated, then sent it. 5 minutes passed. The rain kept falling. 10 minutes finally, the reply came. "I never forgot. I just stayed quiet." She sat down again, her heart aching in a way that felt beautiful and sad at the same time. Meanwhile, in a quiet house in the hills of Hollywood, Keanu sat on his porch, watching the rain with a book resting on his knee. Hadn't touched it. In an hour, his phone was in his hand, the screen still lit from the last message. He hadn't planned to text her, not really. He had written that message the year before that. But he never sent them. Until now. Because this morning, when he woke up and saw the date on the calendar, something in his chest told him enough time had passed. Silence was no longer kindness. It was time to remember out loud. He didn't expect a reply. "What's she?" He had responded. His fingers hovered again. Then slowly he typed, "I thought about calling, but I didn't know if you'd want to hear from me." Her reply came quickly this time. "I didn't know either, but now I do." The conversation didn't go on much longer. They exchanged a few more words. Small things, polite, careful. But the quiet between the texts said more than the messages. When Sandra finally went to bed that night, the rain still tapping gently against the windows, she felt something shift inside her. The loneliness hadn't gone away, but something had returned. Hope the next morning. Sandra walked into her kitchen and found a package on her doorstep. There was no name on it, just her address. She brought it inside, opened the soft brown wrapping, and saw a simple box made of dark wood. Inside, there was a notebook, old, leather-bound, with a note tucked inside. "You said once you wanted to write again?" I remembered. I thought this might help. There was no signature. But she knew Keanu had remembered more than her birthday. He had remembered her. And for the first time in years, Sandra sat at her table, opened a notebook, and wrote. Not a script. Not a message, just thoughts. Feelings in between the lines. A soft whisper of something she never expected to feel again. Connection, hope, maybe even love, not as it once was, but as something new, something waiting quietly in the wings. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew this. He hadn't forgotten her, and that meant the world. The letter he never meant to send. Days passed quietly. Sandra didn't tell anyone about the message. Not that there were many people to tell. Her world was small now. Some neighbors, the woman at the bookstore, and a retired teacher who sometimes joined her for tea. They would have smiled kindly, said that's sweet, and moved on. But to Sandra, it wasn't just a message. It was a door, and for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to open it. Keanu sat in his kitchen 2 nights later, a glass of water in one hand, a worn-out envelope in the other. The envelope was old, yellowing at the edges. Inside it was a letter written almost 8 years ago. He had never mailed it. After that night at the restaurant, when Sandra said she thought about leaving Hollywood every day, he went home and poured his feelings into this letter. Not a love letter. Exactly. More like an apology. And a thank you. And a confession that he didn't know how to be close to people anymore. Not even to the ones who mattered. But he never sent it. He told himself it would only make things worse. That Sandra didn't need that kind of honesty. That maybe silence was a softer kindness. He was wrong. That night, he picked up his phone again. Opened the last thread with her. The last message she had sent still sat on the screen. I didn't know either, but now I do. He read it over and over, wondering what she meant. Wondering if maybe, just maybe, she still missed him too. He took a deep breath and typed slowly. I wrote you a letter once, a long time ago, never sent it. The reply came quickly. What did it say? His hands froze. He looked at the envelope again. It's torn at the corners, but still holding all the weight of years inside it. Finally he typed, I'll show you. Then he added, Are you in town? Sandra stared at her screen. Her heart beat faster. Her fingers trembled just a little as she typed back, I am. Why? A pause, a long one. Then the reply, coffee. Tomorrow noon, that little place you liked. On Sunset? She didn't answer right away. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe. What was this? A reunion? A one-time thing? She didn't know. But she knew one thing. She wasn't ready to hide anymore. She typed, I'll be there. The next day, she stood in front of the mirror for far too long. Her hair was grayer now, her skin softer with age. But she didn't want to cover it. She wanted to be seen for who she was now, not as she had been in movies. She wore a soft blue sweater, the one that made her feel calm. No makeup, except a touch of lip balm. And in her eyes, something deeper than beauty, peace, mixed with nerves. She arrived 10 minutes early. The cafe hadn't changed much. Same wooden tables. Same soft music. She chose the corner seat and waited. Her tea came. No Keanu, 5 minutes. Past 10, then the door opened, and there he was, wearing a black coat, his hair slightly longer, a calm expression on his face. But when his eyes met hers, something broke open between them. Not pain, not joy, just truth. He walked slowly to the table and sat across from her. Hi, she said softly. Hi, he replied, just as gently. They stared at each other for a moment. Not awkward, just quiet, like two people remembering how to speak after years. Underwater? You still like green tea? he asked. Some things don't change, she said. He smiled. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out the envelope. He placed it on the table, carefully, like it might fall apart if he moved too fast. I read it again last night, he said. It's not perfect. It's messy, but it's honest. She looked at the envelope. Her fingers touched the edge. May I? She asked. He nodded. She opened it slowly, unfolded the paper inside, and began to read. He watched her eyes, gentle, but unreadable. The letter read, Dear Sandra, I don't know how to say this face to face, so I'm writing it instead. I keep thinking about that night. The way you said you thought about leaving Hollywood every day, and the way I couldn't say anything back. I guess I'm afraid of everything. Of losing people. Of saying too much. Of being known. I've kept so much of myself hidden for so long that I don't know what's real anymore. But you see people. You saw me. I didn't know what to do with that. I want you to know you were right to leave. If you ever do, you deserve peace. You deserve mornings with no cameras. You deserve soft tea and a quiet life. I'll miss you. Even if we don't speak again, I'll always be grateful for your friendship, for your laughter, for seeing me when I didn't even see myself. Kilowatorin, she finished reading. Her hands were shaking. She looked up. He was still watching her, silent. Why didn't you send it? She whispered. I thought it would hurt more than help. It wouldn't have, she said. It would have helped. He looked down. I'm sorry. It too. They sat in silence again. Then Sandra did something unexpected. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his, and he didn't pull away. They talked for over an hour. Not about the letter. Not about the years they lost. They talked about books, about how she had started journaling again, about the trees outside her window, about a little dog he had adopted named Luna, about simple things that carried deep weight. And when they stood up to leave, he looked at her and said softly, I'm glad I remembered. She smiled. Me too. As they walked out into the cold afternoon air, they didn't hold hands. They didn't make promises, but they walked side by side. Two people who hadn't spoken in 10 years. Now, it's finding their way back, not to the past, but to something new, something better that night. Back in her house, Sandra placed the letter in a drawer beside her bed, and before she turned off the light, she picked up her pen. On a clean page, she wrote, Dear Keanu, then paused, smiled, and kept writing. The journal she never meant to charrette days that followed felt different. Not louder, not faster. Just different, like an old melody had started to play again in the background of Sandra's life. She still woke early, still made her tea, still walked around her quiet house. But something had shifted. For the first time in years, she looked forward to her phone lighting up, and often, it did not with long conversations, but with short, thoughtful messages from Keanu. Sometimes he sent photos of Luna asleep under a blanket. Sometimes just a sentence like, rain today, reminds me of Vancouver. Sometimes a memory like the time she had tripped on a wire during a shoot and tried to pretend it was on purpose. She replied with her own little stories, her garden, her failed attempt at baking a pear tart, the neighbor's cat who had adopted, her porch. They weren't rushing. They weren't planning anything. But slowly, quietly, they were rebuilding something. One morning, Sandra woke up to soft light pouring through her windows. The air was crisp, clean. She sat at her kitchen table, with her journal, the same one Keanu had given her in the wooden box, and wrote. She didn't write about Hollywood. She didn't write about her career. She wrote about loneliness, about what it felt like when the cameras stopped, about how silence can be louder than applause, and about how one message, just one, can change everything. She closed the journal and placed it beside her tea, then stared at it. A quiet thought came. What if he read this? Her chest tightened, not because she was afraid of being judged, but because sharing it meant opening herself fully. It meant being seen the next day. Keanu invited her to join him for a walk in a quiet park just outside the city. No paparazzi, no noise. just trees and birds, and winding trails where two people could walk side by side without saying much. She agreed. When he pulled up in his old, quiet electric car, she stepped outside and smiled. He wore a gray beanie and a soft black coat. His smile was gentle, eyes warm. "You look good," he said softly. "You're kind," she replied. They walked for almost an hour, sometimes talking, sometimes just listening to the wind. At one point, she said, "I've been writing again." He looked at her, eyes curious. "That makes me happy." She reached into her bag and pulled out the journal. "I wrote something I want you to read," she said. He took it slowly, as if holding something sacred. "You're sure?" "Yes," she said. "But not here. Take your time." He nodded, tucking it into his coat. They kept walking. Neither of them said another word about it that night. Keanu sat in his small reading room, the journal resting in his lap. He opened the first page and saw her handwriting, soft, steady as he read. The words reached deep into him. She had written about the weight of silence, about waking up and forgetting what joy felt like, about how kindness sometimes feels like a forgotten language, about how pain can hide in plain sight, in quiet mornings, in empty rooms, in missed birthdays, and at the end, she wrote, "I stopped believing people remembered me. Then you did." His eyes welled up. He closed the journal slowly and sat in silence for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and sent her a voice message. He didn't trust himself to type. His voice was low, a little shaky. "Thank you for sharing that. It's honest, painful, beautiful. I want you to know. I've felt those same silences, even when surrounded by people. You're not alone, Sandy. Not anymore." The next morning, she listened to the message twice, then once more, and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. Relief that someone understood, that after all these years, one person she thought had drifted away was actually walking right back into her life. A few days later, Keanu invited her to meet again, this time at his home. She hadn't been there in over a decade. When she arrived, the gate opened slowly, and he was waiting at the front door, holding Luna in his arms. "She's been waiting to meet you," he smiled. "I've heard so much about you, Luna," Sandra laughed. The house smelled like fresh herbs and wood, simple, quiet, lived in. It felt like him. They sat on the back porch, where trees stretched high and the sound of wind filled the space. "You want to know something strange?" he said, double quotes always. "I bought this house the same month we stopped talking." She looked at him, surprised. "I didn't know that." "Yeah," he nodded. "I think part of me wanted to disappear. But the truth is, I was hoping someday someone would knock on the door." She didn't say anything right away. Then quietly she replied, "I guess I knocked with my journal." He smiled. "You did?" "Day." Sat in silence again, but this time it was full of trust, of peace, of the kind of connection that doesn't need to be rushed or defined. After a while, he stood and walked inside. Returned with something small, a gift wrapped in simple paper. "It's not a birthday present," he said. "It's a today present." She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a silver bookmark, engraved with just 3 words, "You are remembered." Her eyes filled again. "Keanu." "You are," he said gently. "Always." Later that evening, before she left, he walked her to her car. The wind had picked up, carrying leaves across the driveway. As she opened the door, she turned to him. "Thank you," she said softly. "For..." "What?" "For not forgetting." He didn't answer right away then. In the quietest voice, he said, "I never stopped thinking about you. I just didn't know if I had the right to say it." She looked at him for a long moment, then leaned forward, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "You do." As she drove away, the trees seemed to wave goodbye, and Keanu stood there, watching the taillights disappear down the road. His hand touched the spot where her lips had grazed his cheek, not in romance, but in something stronger. Forgiveness. A bridge was being rebuilt, and for the first time in 10 years, both of them were ready to cross it. The dinner they never planned it had been 2 weeks since. Sandra shared her journal with Keanu. 2 weeks since they sat on his back porch, speaking truths They had kept inside for years, and in those 2 weeks something beautiful happened. Not loudly, not all at once, but gently, like spring returning after a long, quiet winter. They messaged more often now, sometimes in the morning, sometimes late at night, but always with care. Sandra had just finished a walk through her garden one evening when her phone buzzed. It was Keanu, double quotes, "Can I cook for you?" The message read. She smiled at the screen. "You cook?" she replied. His answer came back quickly. "Well, I try. I make good pasta, or at least I don't ruin it." She laughed softly, then typed, "Then yes, cook for me." 2 days later, she stood outside his house again, holding a small bottle of red wine and wearing a scarf she hadn't worn in years, one he once complimented during a press tour long ago. The door opened before she knocked. He was barefoot, apron tied loosely, and smiling like a child who had a secret. "Come in," he said. "Don't judge the kitchen." "No promises," she grinned. The house was warm, filled with the soft scent of garlic and basil. "Ah!" Luna trotted over and rested her head on Sandra's foot like she had known her forever. They ate outside on the porch, under soft yellow lights that swung gently in the breeze. Pasta with roasted vegetables, warm bread, and stories. Stories from years they hadn't shared. He told her about the books he read during the pandemic, how he learned to garden, how he lost his best friend, and sat in silence for a whole week after. She told him about the letters she wrote but never sent, how she watched their old movies sometimes, but only when it rained, how she once thought about calling him during a thunderstorm but couldn't find the words. They spoke. Slowly, gently, like walking barefoot across an old wooden floor, afraid to make it creak. After dinner, they stayed outside. He brought out 2 mugs of warm tea and a thick blanket. They wrapped it around their shoulders and sat side by side, not touching but close enough to feel the warmth. Above them, the sky was full of stars. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Hollywood?" "Everything. The noise, the attention, the purpose." He thought for a while. "Sometimes," he said. "But then I remember how often I wanted to escape." She nodded. "Me too." A long pause. "Do you ever think we were supposed to lose touch?" she asked. He looked at her. "Think. Maybe we were supposed to find each other again. After we understood what we really needed." She smiled gently. "And what do you need now?" He turned toward her, his eyes soft, steady. "This ain't just that one word," and she understood. "Before." She left. They stood at the door again, like old friends, like something more. He leaned in and held her, not too tight, not too long, just enough, and she let herself rest in his arms for a moment. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "Thank you for trusting me," he replied. As she drove home, she didn't turn on the radio. She didn't check her phone. She just let the quiet wrap around her. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was full. The next morning, Keanu found something in his mailbox, a small envelope. No return address. Inside was a single photo, a still from one. Of their earliest movies together, they were laughing. Both of them younger. Eyes bright, joy real. On the back, she had written 4 words. "We were always real." He held the photo in his hands for a long time, then placed it in a frame beside his bed. Not because he was trying to go back, but because now, for the first time in years, he believed in going forward. With her, meanwhile, Sandra sat at her table. With a new page open in her journal, she had written something new that morning. "He sees me, the real me, not the actress, not the name, just me. And somehow, that's enough." A few nights later, he invited her again. This time, not for dinner, but to come with him to a small poetry reading in a bookstore neither of them had visited in years. "I used to go there alone," he said, "but it always felt like it was missing something." She smiled when she read the message. "Let's find out what," she replied. They sat together in the back row that night, 2 people who hadn't spoken in 10 years, now slowly learning each other all over again. And when the final poem was read, the crowd clapped softly. Keanu leaned close and whispered, "I'm glad you're here." She looked at him, eyes full, heart steady. "Me too." Outside, Under the soft glow of the streetlight, she looked up at the night sky. "Do you think we get second chances?" she asked. He looked up with her. "No," he said softly. "I think we get the same chance again when we're finally ready." And with that, they walked to his car together, slowly, quietly, hand in hand. They weren't rushing into the future. They were simply holding the present. And somehow, that was everything. The photo they never took days began to feel lighter. Not because everything was perfect, not because they had gone back to who they once were, but because they were learning how to be who they were now and still mattered to each other. One evening, Sandra stood by the window in her living room, staring at an old photo on the shelf. It was from a film premiere, her and Keanu, smiling for cameras, standing close, but not touching. There was laughter in their eyes, the kind that hides things, the kind that only lasts for a few seconds after the flash. She lifted the frame and looked at it closely. 10 years ago, she thought she had let go of that moment, that person. But now, that photo felt different, like a memory waiting to be rewritten. Keanu, too, had been thinking. He sat alone in his kitchen, staring at a small slip of paper. On it was a list. 5 things he had written down years ago. Things he wanted to do when he stepped away from acting. The first 3 were checked off. Grow a garden, adopt a dog, learn to cook something besides eggs. Last 2 were untouched. Take a road trip without a destination. Tell her the truth circled the last.
Yes.
1, twice. They had been spending more time together now. Walks, ties, bookstore visits, sometimes. They didn't speak for long stretches, and yet there was no awkwardness. But inside both of them, something was building. A question neither had dared to ask out loud. One weekend, Sandra invited him to her house for dinner. "I owe you one," she said. He showed up with flowers, not roses, just wildflowers. Gentle, a little messy, and completely real. When she saw them, she laughed softly. "You remembered," she said. He smiled. "You said you liked flowers that don't try too hard." They ate in her kitchen, pasta again. She joked that it was becoming their tradition. Afterwards, they moved to the living room. The old photo sat on the table, face dashed down. He picked it up, studied. "We never took a photo like this when it was just the 2 of us," he said. "We were always being watched," she replied. He turned it in his hand. "Maybe we still are." She looked at him. "Do you feel that way now?" He shook his head. "Not with you." Silence followed, not heavy, just full. Then he spoke again, voice low. "Can I ask you something real?" She nodded. "Why did we stop talking?" he asked. She paused, then answered softly. "Because we were afraid of what talking would lead to." "And what would it have led to?" he asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Truth." He nodded slowly, then said, "Can I tell you mine?" "Please," she whispered. He took a deep breath. "Back then, I think I loved you. Not in the way people write about in stories, not loudly, but deeply, quietly. And I didn't know what to do with it. I thought I'd mess it up. I thought maybe you didn't feel the same. So I stepped back." Her eyes didn't blink. "And now?" she asked. He looked at her with eyes full of years. "I don't know what to call it. Maybe it's not love anymore. Maybe it's something even more real. Maybe it's just wanting to stay." A tear slid down her cheek, not from sadness, but from the relief of finally hearing what she had always wondered. "I never stopped caring," she said. "I just didn't know how to say it." He reached for her hand, held it gently. "We're saying it now," he said. They didn't kiss. They didn't cry loudly. They just sat, hands held, souls quiet, hearts open later, stood to leave, but paused by the door. "I still think we should take that photo," he said. "What photo?" "Where it's just us. Not characters, not actors, just us." "Now," she smiled. "Let's do it." A week later, they went to a quiet spot by the coast. No tourists, no lights, just wind. Sky and the sound of the ocean. Keanu brought a small old camera, the kind you have to wind before each shot they took. Turns taking pictures of each other, laughing not. Posing, just being, and then one of them asked a stranger to take a photo of them together. They stood close, arms around each other, both looking at the sea. The camera clicked, and in that frame no scripts, no makeup, no masks. Something true was captured. Not the past, not the future, just the now. On the drive back, neither of them spoke much, but at one point Sandra reached for his hand and said, "That felt right." He smiled, because it was. When they returned home, he texted her that night, "When can I see you again?" Her reply came quickly, "Tomorrow and the day after." "Whenever you want." He stared at the message, heartful, then replied, "Good, because I think this time I'm staying." The quiet place they built Toga Therit had been 6 months. 6 months since the birthday message. 6 months since the coffee shop reunion. 6 months since two people who had once been silent for 10 years began speaking again slowly, gently, honestly, and now. Something steady had grown between them. Not a romance rushed by emotion. Not a friendship, bound by old memories, but something deeper. A connection that needed no labels. Keanu visited Sandra often. Sometimes with Luna curled up in the back seat. Sometimes with new recipes to try. Sometimes just to sit by her fireplace and read in silence. While rain tapped on the windows, she visited him too. Helped him replant part of his garden. Sat on the porch while he tuned his old guitar once. They even danced in his kitchen. No music, just laughter, and the rhythm of something invisible but real. One Sunday morning, Keanu looked out his window and watched the sky turn orange. The world was quiet. It's the kind of quiet that makes you listen to your own heart. He picked up his phone. "Come over. I have something to show you." Sandra arrived an hour later. Wearing an old sweater and carrying warm bread she had baked that morning, he took her hand and led her out back. The garden had changed in one corner. Under the shade of an old tree, he had placed 2 wooden chairs. Between them, a small table, and hanging above a hand-carved sign. She walked closer and read the words, "This is our quiet place." Her hand covered her mouth. "You made this." He nodded. Double quotes, "I thought maybe we needed a place that's just ours. A space without noise, without cameras, where we can just be." She sat down slowly. He sat beside her. "Do you think people will understand?" She asked softly. Maybe not, but we do. So that's enough." They sat there for hours, watching the birds. Talking about small things, recipes, books, the weather. But between those things were deeper silences. Silences that didn't feel empty. Silences that felt like home. Sometime later, Sandra reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "What's this?" He asked. "Something I wrote," she said. "For you. Also for me." He opened it slowly. Inside was a short letter. It read, "Dear Keanu, I used to think life was about moments. Big ones, loud ones, bright ones. But you've taught me that. It's also about the soft ones, the moments in between. I don't know what happens next, and maybe we don't need to. All I know is, you remembered me when no one else did. And doing that, you helped me remember myself. Thank you for walking back into my life without asking for anything. Thank you for seeing me. Not the actress, not the name. Just me. I hope I've done the same for you. Love." Sandra folded the letter slowly. His hands trembled. He looked at her and whispered, "You have." Later that evening, as the sky turned blue and the first stars appeared, Keanu stood and reached into his pocket. He held something small in his palm. A key. "What's this?" she asked. "It's the key to this house," he said quietly. "In case you ever want to come by, even if I'm not here, even if you just want to sit under the tree." Her fingers shook as she took it. "Thank you," she said. The next few months passed with a calm rhythm. They cooked together more often. They watched old movies, not theirs, but quiet ones, meaning sometimes they sat in silence. Sometimes they danced barefoot in the garden. They took short road trips with no destination once. They got lost on purpose, and when people asked what they were now, they smiled, because they didn't need to explain. They were just them, and that was more than enough. On Sandra's next birthday, she didn't wake up alone. She woke up to soft music, to sunlight through curtains, and to the sound of Keanu in the kitchen, making tea the way she liked it. When she walked out, he turned and smiled. "Happy birthday," he said softly. She walked to him, hugged him. Not quickly, not tightly, just long enough for the moment to settle in. "Thank you for remembering." "Right," she whispered. He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I'll always remember." Outside, in the quiet place under the tree, Luna rested beside the wooden chairs. A soft wind moved the leaves, and the world kept turning. But inside that little space they had built, a space of truth, kindness, and second chances, time didn't need to rush. They'd found what mattered, and they were holding it gently together.